joined by our guy of the Candlestick Chronicles, Chris Biderman. Chris, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm fantastic. How are you guys? It's been a while. Long time no see.
I know. Good to see you and good to have you on the show. Before we go with the Candlestick Chronicles and the Niners who just smacked the Jacksonville Jaguars, you were in the building. We had a nice dinner together. What were your takeaways from the Kings and their win over the Cavs?
Yeah, I mean, if they're going to shoot 65% and make 55% of their threes, they're going to be a pretty tough team to beat. But I think that ultimately getting De'Aaron Fox back is he's the straw that stirs the drink, I should say, right? Like the offense is just at a completely different level. It looked like, as good as the offense was last year, it looked like it hit a different level last night. And so it makes you question how good can this offense get? Does it still have room to improve? And I would think, based on last night against a pretty good defensive team in Cleveland, that answer could be yes. Now, does that mean that they're going to go to the Western Conference Finals and win multiple playoff series? That's to be determined. The West is a lot better this year than last year. And so, the Kings are going to still have to improve defensively, but you have to like what you saw from them, given it was De'Aaron Fox's first game back.
Yeah, and talking about the Kings defense and them getting better on that side of the floor, I mean, to me, the big standout last night was Keegan Murray and his defensive effort on Donovan Mitchell, and the fact that he was still able to be a massive threat shooting the ball still, which we saw him struggle against the Warriors with earlier in this season. Just, I mean, if Keegan's gonna add defense and a little bit of a two-way element to his game, just in general, how do you feel like Keegan kind of unlocks the potential of this team and just how the floor and the ceiling of this team is kind of tied into Keegan's development?
Yeah, it feels like Mike Brown is making a really concerted effort to match Keegan up against the opponent's best perimeter player, right? And so I wonder if that's just like Mike Brown, even more than just like focusing on Keegan's defense, just being like, hey, take this challenge personally, right? Like you're going to go up. We need you to play at an all-star level for the Kings to take that next step and become a real Western Conference contender, right? So I think Mike Brown is just sort of challenging Keegan to not only play better defense, but say, hey, you're going to go up against our best guy. You're going to guard Steph Curry. You're going to guard Donovan Mitchell. And we trust you to be in that spot and do it at a reasonable level. And the Kings really need it because, frankly, like, they don't have a whole lot of perimeter defense with size, right? Like I think one of their biggest issues defensively is being able to prevent dribble penetration. And a lot of that is just their starting guards aren't known for their defense. Kevin Huerter is not a defensive guy. Harrison Barnes is a little long in the tooth at this point in his career. And you obviously don't have a whole lot of rim protection with Domantas Sabonis. So it's going to be up to their perimeter defense to really improve and take a step. And when you look at the guys in the regular rotation, Keegan Murray is that guy that can take that next step and elevate their perimeter defense a little bit. So given his size and all of that, it's super important that he develops defensively. And even, like I said, bigger than that is, can Keegan Murray take the challenge night to night going up against the opponent's best perimeter player? Because they need him to reach that all-star level. So I think it's a fun challenge for Keegan, and it's smart by Mike Brown to challenge him in that way and try to push him to elevate his game that way.
Talking to Chris Biderman of the Candlestick Chronicles. Now time to switch over to that team in the Bay, the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, Chris, is there any way you can script a better palate cleanser for the 49ers than what they did to the Jags after the bye week, adding Chase Young, getting healthy, a great game for Brock Purdy? This is exactly what the doctor ordered.
Yeah, with the exception of maybe Christian McCaffrey getting in the end zone, right?
Right.
They tried.
Yeah.
They really tried. I think that was the only thing. Look, like, they haven't been great in the red zone, I guess, overall the last few weeks. But obviously, when you're scoring long touchdowns, that's not going to be too much of an issue against a team like Jacksonville. But, like, it went about as well as it could have, right? Like it looked like, through 5 weeks of the season, I was talking about the Niners being the best team in the league. I was comparing them to the 1994 team based on how they were playing and how much talent they had, right? And that 1994 team, arguably the best, if not one of the best teams in franchise history, right? Like that's the level that I think this team could get to given the talent that's on the roster. And then, of course, they have a 3-game losing streak, making me and anybody else with that opinion look pretty stupid. So it was good to, for the 49ers to get back get their swagger back. I think there's an intangible element having Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams on the field. Like the production speaks for itself with those guys, but obviously like their demeanor, their attitude, their toughness, their swagger, I think has a huge impact on the way they're able to play offensively. And then you even see defenses adjust every time Deebo Samuel goes in motion, right? Like you can tell the defense is sort of freaking out, trying to figure out how to defend him. And then you also have to factor in Christian McCaffrey and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle. So that was about as well as it could have gone for the 49ers, I would say, with the exception of getting Christian McCaffrey the touchdown. And then defensively, you add Chase Young to an already super talented pass rush, and you have a secondary that's playing at a higher level and forcing Trevor Lawrence to hold on to the ball a little bit longer rather than just, getting to the top of his drop and getting the ball out quickly. It was, he was a little confused. They were mixing up the looks they were showing him, and it allowed the pass rush more time to get to him. And 5 sacks, that's exactly what the formula is for the 49ers. It's, you have to have a good secondary to complement a good pass rush. You can't just allow a quarterback to get rid of the ball quickly, which what happened for most of the last 3 games, right before the Jacksonville game. So that was our biggest issue defensively. In addition to stopping the run, they did a really good job of that. So all in all, I would say it's about as good as it could have been expected on Sunday for sure.
Yeah, and talking about ranking these Niner teams and how important their defense is, the thing that's really the when you have Kyle Shanahan as your offensive coordinator, head coach, whatever you want to call him, the offense is going to take care of itself. The thing that has really kept the Niners, in the NFC Championship games and in these Super Bowl contentions has been their defense and how elite their defense has been. The past couple of years, their scoring defense has been near the tops of the NFL. I think last year they were actually number 1, and they're sitting tied with the Chiefs right now for fewest points allowed. How would you rank, just from a talent perspective, the talent that the Niners have on this defensive unit, and just how it ranks in these past couple years, I guess maybe in a post-Willis era or even before that?
Yeah, coming into the season, we had talked on the podcast a little bit about comparing like this defensive line to the 2019 defensive line, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that 2019 defensive line was basically 50% different with DeForest Buckner there and D Ford there. D Ford dealt with hamstring injuries. I think he played about 20% of the snaps that season, but he was still super effective when he was on the field. It felt like anytime there was 3rd and long, the Niners were going to either heat up the quarterback or get a sack or force a turnover in those spots. So coming into the year, before they added Chase Young, there was an interesting conversation to be had about comparing this defensive line with Javon Hargrave and a better version of Nick Bosa to that 2019 unit. And then you add Chase Young, a former number 2 overall pick, who's just, super talented. And yeah, there were a lot of people, I think as it's borne out, this hasn't been the correct take, but even going into his draft, there were some people who thought Chase Young was a better prospect than Nick Bosa. It hasn't borne out that way, but just given the overall talent of this defensive line, I think you can make a pretty strong case that this group is better than the 2019 defensive line. And that was the best defensive line in the league, and it wasn't particularly close. Now, I would say the Niners don't have Richard Sherman, right? Richard Sherman was an all-pro that year, and it wasn't so much about his physical skills. It was just about how intelligent he was and how he could basically call out the play to his teammates based on, where offensive players were lining up and down and distance tendencies and all that. Like Richard Sherman was in essence a coach in the field in a similar way that Fred Warner is. But now, Charvarius Ward, maybe a more physically talented player at this point in his career than Richard Sherman was then, but I don't know that you could replace Richard Sherman's intelligence. I do think Jimmy Ward is still a pretty sizable upgrade over what they have at safety with Deshaun Gibson and certainly the nickel position, although you have to feel pretty good about what you saw from Diamador Lenore moving into the slot and Ambry Thomas obviously moving outside. But it's a long-winded way of me saying that I think this defensive line is better than 2019. I think the secondary in 2019 was probably a little bit better than this one. So it is a little bit different, but I think overall, like the ceiling of this version of the 49ers defense is a little bit better because you do feel better probably about Chase Young than you did about D Ford. And you have Nick Bosa now playing at a higher level than he did when he was a rookie. Added with Javon Hargrave, who completely dominated that game on Sunday. And Eric Armstead, who's, he's not going to put up huge sack numbers, but he is a very steady player and also really good against the run. So comparing them, I think they're very comparable, but I think the ceiling, given the pass rush that this team could have, is better than 2019 because of the addition of Chase Young.
Chris Biderman, thank you so much. Candlestick Chronicles. We will talk to you again next week, hopefully celebrating another Niners W because they're going up against the Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield, and we know that Nick Bosa and Chase Young, they're going to have something ready for him.
Yeah, they're not huge Baker Mayfield guys after what happened in college, if you remember.
Exactly, to put it kindly. Thank you, Chris. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we will talk to you soon.
No problem. You guys have a good one. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Chris Biderman, Candlestick Chronicles. Make sure you go check out that pod. They do a lot of good work. And Chris can talk Kings, too. That was great to start off the segment. Got to get to a break. When we get back,